another episode of Modern Therapy, where we talk about modern therapy. Today's guest is Dee Paul, who's a disabled U.S. Navy veteran, a Native American holy man, and a spiritual warrior who has spent a lifetime walking the line between the seen and the unseen. Rooted in both his native heritage and his Christian faith, he serves as a Heyoka, a healer and seer who has investigated and cleansed countless haunted properties, facing everything from mischievous spirits to dangerously dark entities in his mission to bring healing and relief. As an author and storyteller, he describes himself as a hollow bone, a vessel through which Great Spirit speaks, turning real-world encounters with the supernatural into powerful spiritual messages on the page. His latest work, centered on the chilling legacy of the WINDHAM men and the restless spirit of Elizabeth, weaves together themes of revenge, karma, reincarnation, and the timeless battle between good and evil. On today's episode of the Modern Therapy Podcast, we welcome Dee Paul to talk about his journey, his work with haunted spaces and oppressed souls, and what it means to stand as a light in the presence of darkness. Thank you for meeting with us today, Dee Paul.
Well, holy moly, that's a hell of an introduction, huh, my friend?
Well, for a great veteran like yourself, it's an honor to have you here today.
Oh, that's very kind of you, but I think Steve Martin said it best, right? The new phone book's here. I am somebody.
Yes, he did say that. Well, Dee, start by sharing a bit about who you are beyond the titles. Who is Dee Paul in your own words, and how did your spiritual journey begin?
Well, my AARP club tells me that I'm the sexiest member in the 75 and older club.
I can see that.
So I've got that going for me. Okay. Of course, there's only 2 people in our AARP club, and I'm the president.
There you go.
So that voting was short and sweet. So I've had an interesting life. I really have. So I mean, there's a lot for me to tell. But short of my good looks, I'm not too fond of boasting my own horn, right? But I got some pretty good connections in the spirit world, and I've been doing a lot of spirit work for the better part of my life. But it was a long road in the making. I mean, you're a fellow Navy vet. It's like going to boot camp 1,000 different times every time a new chapter opens up and presents itself to me. It's like going back to boot camp and going through the crucible and coming out the other side, right? All the challenges the baby Jesus, Great Spirit, puts in front of us.
I get it. You describe yourself as a Native American holy man and a Heyoka. I hope I'm saying that right. Please correct me if I'm not. For listeners who may be unfamiliar, as I am, what does that mean in your lived experience, and how does it shape the way you move through this world?
So everything I talk about in the Native American sense of things, if you will, is my beliefs. It's what my life has accumulated in experiences and understandings throughout different Native American customs and cultures. So I want to emphasize that my beliefs are my own, and I don't speak for any other individuals, any other Native Americans. This is my position, my truth, if you will. A Heyoka is something that I believe you're born with or born as. And for me, I was certainly born to be a Heyoka. What's a Heyoka? In its simplest sense, it's a person who looks at things from angles and positions that few others look at things from. I definitely don't follow the herd, right? And I don't have a herd mentality. I'm the opposite of a herd. I'm outside of the box. I'm never inside the box. I'm never comfortable in the in crowds. One of the historical things people understand of a Heyoka traditionally in the Native American community, a Heyoka would ride through the village backwards on a horse, as an example. Okay. But Heyoka is always getting folks to see things from a different perspective and broaden their mind.
You have a powerful blend of Native American heritage and Christian faith. How do you hold those two spiritual streams together without feeling like you have to choose one over the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really is a great question. For me, I don't. Others that look on me have these assumptions like it's a struggle for me to, be Christian and Native American, and that's just not true. I've been studying both faiths, if you will, my entire life. As a youngster, I was extremely close to the Native American circles, but the baby Jesus was always a part of that. But I didn't necessarily agree with traditional church and so on. I don't disagree with a lot of it, but I just don't agree with. I should do it. A lot of it. I don't disagree with all of it, and I don't agree with all of it. Once man sticks his fingers in, spiritual work, money, power, fame, all that crap kind of gets commingled and things get lost in, to be kind, translation, right? So for me, I've always taken the stuff that resonates with me in both the Catholic faith, Christian faith, and my Native American beliefs. And that's what I encourage everybody to do. Don't try to push yourself into, a round hole if you're a square peg or vice versa.
That's right.
Take what resonates with you and keep moving on those topics, right? I was at a church service some time ago where the priest went off on this little tangent about the parishioners were committing sins if they didn't pray for priests that were, pedophiles. And I almost lost my mind. My wife's a hardcore Irish Catholic, and I support her and I support the beliefs, but I don't support the stupid stuff that comes out of people's mouths, from time to time. I don't think you're committing a sin if you don't pray for people who are, who have preyed upon or who prey upon other people, right? I don't think they're worthy of my prayers. And in the same breath, like the baby Jesus teaches, right? You got to forgive. Well, I've done a lot of forgiving. I've forgiven myself on a lot of things, and that's always the toughest, right? To forgive ourselves. I say I've forgiven myself, but in my core, I still hold it there. But I was raised in a brutal environment, and one of the things they tell you is, you gotta forgive and release that. Well, I've tried, and I'm just not man enough. I'm not brave enough. What's the word, right? To forgive somebody who spent, more than a decade belittling, berating, physically beating the bloody hell out of me, and torturing my young life. I've just never been able to forgive that stepfather. In my book, 2,442 Steps to Crazy, I talk about what it was like to be raised in such abuse. And somebody just read it and posted another 5-star review, had some very eloquent words, a fellow vet, about how the book helps vets and everybody else, overcome their childhood abuse, right? But let me close that loop with this. I strive to be a good Christian. I strive to be a good holy man. But again, I'm fallible just like everybody else. And my strengths come out when they're needed to, but my weaknesses are like my inability to forgive someone who, tortured me, right? Jesus says I'm supposed to, but I'm just not there yet. And I've tried. So if you're in that same boat, listen, don't beat yourself up. Just keep thinking on the stuff that resonates with you and keep moving forward in that sense. Don't try to swallow the whole Bible if you're a Bible fan, right? There's so many contradictions in the Bible that you can lose your mind thinking it out, right? Pick the stuff that resonates with you and keep your faith moving forward. and I'll close that part with this. I feel that faith is deeply, deeply personal. And for the better part of my life, I didn't talk about it. The reason I'm talking about it now is because Great Spirit has called upon me to put my message out there, put my life's experiences out there for the betterment of others. How's that resonate with you, my Navy friend?
Indeed, indeed. And as you speak, and as I look at your hat with the bold lettering, I think back on my time on the SSN 638 USS Well, and I ask you this. Take us back to your time in the U.S. Navy. How did your military service and your experiences as a disabled veteran inform your spiritual work and the way you approach helping others today?
So I didn't know we had what'd you say, 637 boat?
I was on the SSN 638. It's a USS Well.
638, the Whale?
Yeah.
638. So what is that? One step above the 637 class, right? Or no, that was a 637 class.
No, it was a 637 class. Right.
Yeah. So the boat I was on, ready for this? What's that picture look like to you up there?
Looks like my old nemesis, the USS Whale.
that's my boat doing an emergency blow, right? Man, I got some wild stories about my ride in the Navy, But I served on the boat made famous by Tom Clancy, right? The USS Dallas SSN 700, the boat that was named, or the boat that Tom Clancy made a book and then a movie out of, called The Hunt for Red October.
That's right.
Okay? I actually read his book while we were deployed. I think we did a med run or an IO run. I don't remember which, but I read his book, and then not too long before my EAOS came up and I was getting out, a quartermaster came on board who was dispatched to Hollywood to be a technical advisor, to get to spend 2 weeks watching the filming of the movie. Right, the guy had just reported to the boat. He was a third class or a second class, not yeoman, a quartermaster, and he wasn't sub-qualified and didn't have any deployments, and yet they sent him to Hollywood. You gotta love the chain of command, right?
Right.
But, my ride in the Navy was something else. I mean, I qualified submarines in 89 days. Qualified, yeah. And for all your guests who heard my fellow submariner kind of wince when I said 89 days, watch how much he winces when I say this. That was when I was deployed, right? I met the boat in Diego Garcia on the back half of a 6.5-month IO run, okay, around the world cruise, right? Left Groton, came back through the Panama Canal, stopped in Australia, so on and so on, right? When I got to the boat, you know what they put me on, right? Mess cranking. 90 days of dishes, potatoes, and serving chow, right?
Yeah.
When I got to the boat, the CO ordered me to meet him at the tennis courts on Diego Garcia, right? I was an E3. So, you don't meet captains, right? So I figured I was in trouble. But when I got there, he looked me square in the eye and said, "Your record says you're a 4.0 sailor, and I need you on this boat, and I need you qualified. I need you qualified watch stations and submarines, and I need you to crank and do it all at the same time because we are in a serious transition turnover." So that was my motivation. I qualified, helms planes, so 45-16. I did all this at sea while our first run of 70, 80 days underwater. And yeah, I qualified submarines in 89 days.
That's
so
amazing.
On top of cranking 15 hours a day, right? Doing dishes. You know the drill if you're a submariner.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I did so well at qualifying submarines. They didn't bump me up to a stateroom and give me special treatment, short of asking me to do another 90-day tour of mess cranking. So my first 6 months on the boat was doing anything but submarine work, short of driving and so on. Okay. But it led to a lot of good stuff, and we did a lot of stuff. I was deployed 2 years, 1 month on a 3-year, 2-month hitch on the Dallas. Thank
you for your service in 89 days. That is amazing.
That's That's what the letter of commendation I got from a Commodore said. I think Commodore is subgroup 2.
Yes,
Subgroup 2 out of Groton, right? Or is it Devron 12? I don't remember.
Yeah, I was Groton too. Yep, remember that city? Another
No shit.
head shake.
So I'll tell you, where are you, my friend? Where are you out of?
Now I'm in North Carolina, Durham, North
You're
Carolina.
in North Carolina?
Yeah.
Well, I'm 40 minutes north of the sub base.
Oh, okay. So you're in New Haven?
No, other way. I'm north,
Oh,
heading towards Massachusetts, Rhode Island.
okay.
So I'm like 2 hours from Boston and 40 minutes from the
Okay,
sub base and 2.5 hours from New York. And I'm the quiet corner of Connecticut.
I got you.
But no, I still a lot of guys I served with are still around, and one of them's a tour guide on the Nautilus, the museum down there.
Yeah.
And to kind of close that, my grandfather served in the Pacific for the 3 war patrols when World War II broke out.
Okay.
And then they transferred him to Groton and then Wisconsin, where they were building submarines. You know they built submarines in Wisconsin?
It's the first I'm hearing about it, to be honest.
Yeah. I was until I started digging into my grandfather's history as a submarine sailor. He retired. He was both a diesel qualified and a nuke qualified. He retired in 1965. And that's a story in and of itself, because he was Native American, jumped the reservation, disappeared from the Carlisle boarding schools, claimed he was white at the age of 14, and joined the Navy in 1937. Because if you were black or white, if you were black or Indian, the only thing you could be is a mess crank, right? Well, my grandfather joined, claimed he was white, and then retired as a lieutenant commander. Went up through the ranks, became a warrant officer, and then retired. He's buried up in Fort Snelling.
Oh man, that's what's up.
And the crazy part is when I joined the Navy and I checked the box Native American, they said, "You got your tribal card?" What the fuck is a tribal card?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know what a tribal card was.
Right.
So they wouldn't let me sign up as a Native. I had to claim white. How crazy was that?
That is crazy. America. You have investigated and cleansed many haunted houses over the years. What was the first experience that made you realize this is real, and I'm being called to do something about it?
Yeah, that's a long story. That really is, because I've been this way my entire life. So for me, seeing, sensing, knowing the spirit world is almost academic. Kind of like my faith. It was always there. I just needed to figure out how to dust it off and how to best utilize my faith. Well, the same thing, for understanding the spirit world. And, the spirit world is a complex place. There is the simplest way I try to explain people about trying to understand the spirit world is to go to a Gothic Catholic church, one that was built in the 14, 15, 1600s, where it's just packed with these figurines, these gargoyles, and these distorted figures, and these things that people look at. And it's like, why are these things in a church? They don't seem to fit, right? Well, the reality is what's in those churches are images of what is in the spirit world, okay? And it is so diverse with so many different energies and entities and spirits and ghosts and goblins, right? I like to tell people, when you go to a church and you see this gargoyle sitting on top of the church, and you say, why the hell would they put a gargoyle on top of the church? Well, it's for protection, right? And if you look at these images and these faces, they're always pointing out, never pointing in. Well, they're spiritual warriors that are there to protect against darkness invading, sacred space, right? So I've always been spiritually active, but I spent a significant part of my younger life, especially when I was in the Navy, doing my best to kind of hide it, not pay a lot of attention to it. But some of the guys I served with are telling me stories now about things I did or things I would say, you know, dreams I'd have and then tell them what was coming. I was in Libya the first time we went after Gaddafi. And I remember having a couple of dreams before that deployment and, saying to a few of my roommates and shipmates what we were getting into. And they kind of laughed. And then, of course, when we were, inside Gaddafi's line of death, they didn't think it was funny. They were, I actually lost a friend or two because they were, worried that I saw things and when I would tell them things that they didn't want to know. But it's just not how I am. I kind of follow universal law, which is cause no harm, cause no interference. So I do my best to only tell people what I see when they ask. And I've got a standing order. Listen, if you don't want to know, don't ask. Because if you ask me, I'll tell you.
Indeed.
But I could go on for hours about the topic, the question you asked. So if you want to dive into any of the side shoots of my answer, I'm happy to do a deeper dive. Especially to a submarine veteran, baby. The only true Marines on this planet are submarines.
There you go. You called it. When you enter a space that you believe is haunted or spiritually disturbed, what are the first things you pay attention to physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
That's a great question. So I've got a property I've got to go look at. So I'll use that as an example. But before I do, I want to say something. Okay. I'm going to set sacred space so that I've already done that for our podcast, but I want to set sacred space so what I'm about to share doesn't leave this circle, if you will. Great Spirit, what I'm about to say is privileged only for the ears of white light beings. Please block any and all negative, dark, or gray energies or entities from hearing, interfering, or utilizing this information. So, first and foremost, I have to prepare myself. What does that entail? And everybody's different. Okay. My approach is, I put up a lot of protection. I'm big time into crystals and sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco. Right. Used to chew it, but now I burn it and chase darkness away. But I set up a lot of protection and I do as much for seeing as I can. So I'll connect to the property and what's going on there. And I'll talk to my spirit guides and ask them to kind of tell me what I need to know. But I also tap into the natural world, right? I'm looking outside of the property and seeing what nature's doing to interact. As a fellow vet, a guy that I served with was in deep trouble when he reached out. I hadn't seen him in 40 years. And I ended up clearing him and his house and helping him, overcome a part of what he was battling. And when I looked in on his property, it was deafeningly quiet, right? And I assumed that, it was just one of those things. But when I got done clearing his house and his property, and we had to take this low-level demon out of there, once I set a bubble of protection around it and declared it as cleared and free of all dark influences, and it is now a white light space. As soon as I did that, you could feel the light lifting, and this flock of birds came flying in from across the property and landed on the trees right around the house. And the wife of this fellow vet had said that's the first time birds or any animals have come onto our property since she can remember. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to see both the end game of what I need to do, what's the end game? What am I looking to accomplish? And to do that, I got to get a sense of what's there. But for me, it takes time once I get to the property to acclimate. It's like you buy a fish, right? You just don't dump them in the tank. You leave them in the bag and let the temperatures kind of equal out, right? Well, that's kind of what I've got to do. But I've got one Achilles heel on me, and that's my ability to differentiate between good and evil. What do I mean by that? A property that I was looking at with my wife, it was for her business, but it wasn't to look at spirits and clear out a property. So we were going there as kind of an investment thing, right?
Right.
When we get to the property, I wasn't suited up. I didn't have my spiritual armor on. Okay.
Mm.
I was just an average Joe doing what normal people do, right?
Right.
And as I start walking around the property a little bit, I start hearing this hawk above me screaming away. Now, the significance to that to me is very important because nature, sees, senses, knows things that we can't. So
Hmm.
that hawk was clearly telling me something. I wasn't sure what, but I said to myself, all right, I better armor up and start approaching this the right way. And what does that mean? A piece of it is always coming in from the left and always working to your right, always working to your right, always doing things in fours and making sure you got protection up and around you and so on and so on. Well, once we crossed that threshold, I could feel I could feel the energy inside this property. And the property was 300 plus years old. Okay. But I couldn't tell good or bad. What I could see was I could see this one dark entity and it had tethers to these two children. And there was a third entity there, but I still haven't been able to figure out what that one was. When my wife stepped across the threshold, instantly she goes, nope, this thing is evil and nasty. And she had to step back. Okay. So she gets a quick, instant feel of good and bad. For me, it takes a lot more time for me to differentiate between true evil and lower levels, gray energies, poltergeists, and so on. So we had to back out, and then I armored up and wrapped protection around her. Then we went back inside, and sure enough, there was I call it a trickster. It's a form of a demon that had a couple of kids, spirits of a couple of children tethered to it, and it had a third entity that, like I said, I hadn't been able to figure out. Okay, so what do when I do an investigation? Sometimes I'm walking in blind. I have to back up and kind of armor up again, or armor up. And other times, like this next property that I'm going to do some work on, I do a lot of preparation work, and that includes talking to the spirit world and making sure that I have enough protection lined up that if I need to call an Archangel Michael, he's aware and he'll come in and remove whatever needs to be removed. And then when I'm done with all that, we've got to decompress, so to speak. And that's clearing and cleansing ourselves and anybody else that's there so nothing can follow us home and, or stick to us, and, sometimes I miss things and sometimes things will stick to me and I've got to go see some folks that I know and, they'll help pull some darkness off of me. So, it's not a risk-free endeavor. I've had some pretty dark crap, stuck to me and attached to me and interfering in my life from time to time and doing everything it could to try and kill me. Right. That's the level of the fight that I'm in. And again, I could sit here for hours talking to you about this, especially submarine veterans, baby.
Many people who listen to this show have felt a dark presence in their homes or in themselves, but are unsure what to do besides, maybe going to therapy or going to a group. What are some early signs that what they're experiencing is more than just in their head?
What are the early signs? Is that the question?
Yeah, what are some early signs that what they're experiencing is more than just in their head? Like, how can they differentiate between the two? That it might be mental health related, or it might be an entity that's impacting their life.
Yeah, I want to be careful on how I say that. That's a great question, right? Again, one reason I love doing shows with fellow vets is you get to the point, you go to the heart of the issues, and man, you just got some great questions. So I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but I wrote a book called A Date with Suicide. Now, this book, the purpose of it is to combat the 50 plus veterans a day that are taking their lives. Right. Now, I got to go back to your question so I can remember why I wanted to bring up that book. What was the heart of your question? I'm going to make a note.
What are some signs that they can differentiate between the two, like whether it's a mental illness or a mental issue, or whether or not it's really a spiritual entity or presence, poltergeist or whatever, that's impacting them?
Yeah. So let me go back to this and then I'll drive right through that point. A
Yeah.
Date with Suicide is intended to walk the reader through why veterans are committing suicide. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The causes behind it, the reasons, and I pour my heart out into that book because even though I had a brutal childhood and they tried to kill me a couple of times. The boat ran me over once, crushed me between that and the surface ship when we were doing some document transfers on one of those runs that our crypto was compromised when the Walker family sold our crypto, right? So we had to do a lot of briefcase transfers. Well, I was the guy that did that stuff. I got sucked down between the boat and the surface ship one time, and next thing I know, I'm floating above the boat, watching them pull my body out of the ocean. But I never thought of suicide literally until I left my first formal VA appointment, right? And in the book, I get into it. But I remember to this day walking out of that 9-hour day where nothing got accomplished, and saying, man, if this is my life, I would rather kill myself.
Mm.
And it dawned on me, right? Now, fast forward a couple of years, a guy I served with called me up and said he needed to talk. I said, we meet next week. Well, next week was too late. After I got off the phone with him, he hung up the phone and went out to his garage and hung himself. Okay. That was in the early 90s, late 80s, right? So what in his world was mental health issues and what was spiritual? For him, I don't have those answers. So I'll use another guy as an example. Another guy that I served with, he had been at a funeral in Texas for another shipmate, okay? And this is last year, who committed suicide. And these two shipmates were, anti-suicide guys, right? They were both talking to each other, so the other one would be there if one was having suicidal thoughts. And the guy that committed suicide didn't tell him. Well, this guy went to the funeral, and on his way home, he had already decided he was going to kill himself, except one thing. While he was on the plane, he bumped into my book online, A Date with Suicide. I'd only been out for a week. When he got off the plane, he reached out to me and said, we need to talk. I was going home to kill myself, and I read your book, and it stopped me from killing myself, right? That opened the door when he said, I need help. And he asked me for help. So I got him plugged into the VA, got him plugged into mental health training. I brought in a very special person that I use, very rarely, but I use her when, fellow vets, their toes are literally kind of slipping over the edge and they're as close as it's going to get to taking their lives. And the reason the book is named A Date with Suicide is because my research has taught me that the last thing a veteran does before they kill themselves is set a date, right? Everything else they line up, prepare, just like the anal retentive veterans that we are, right? We got to methodically line everything up and then set a date. So his issues were both mental health issues and spiritual. And getting to the heart of your question, what I find is that for some folks, making sure the mental health piece, the therapy, right, the group sessions, the one-on-ones, whatever is needed to deal with the mental health piece is crucial. And that's a key part of what I do is help people, overcome the stigma of, mental health issues and suicidal thoughts, right? The other part is spiritual, because once we're at a point where we're considering suicide, we're already wide open to the spiritual part from the dark side. Okay. And how can I justify that or simplify it? If all you do all day long is have negative thoughts, if all you do is spew negative stuff, you're going to attract exactly what you're generating. It's just the way it is. People in a crowd will all gravitate towards each other that where their vibrations are like-minded, right? What's that mean? The closer you are to God, the higher your vibration. The closer you are to the devil, the lower your vibration.
Right.
And the things that we do, kind of, it's like a turbocharger for the darkness when we're constantly on these negative planes, these negative discussions, and not getting into a positive discussion. So for me, it's understanding what folks need for true mental health help and what they need for spiritual help, right? And to me, again, the two things work hand in glove. In a recent vet that I worked on, he was about as anti-faith as it gets. I mean, as I said to him out loud, I said, listen, you're a borderline atheist, okay? But the four corners of our existence, our physical, our mental, our spiritual, and our emotional bodies, we have to figure out how to balance and align those four parts of our existence, okay? When we can get all of those into alignment, the probability of suicide is very, very, very low. So is the probability of having a dark, angry life, right? How do we get there? Well, when you use this example of this vet that I worked on, that was a borderline atheist. When I went through the first three, I saved the spiritual body for last. Again, he had a dark attachment to him that I knew I had to get out of him, but I had to get the other pieces lined up so he had a good base underneath him, right? People that have a strong faith, I'll tend to come at it a little bit differently. I'll let faith lead the charge, right? So for me, mental health issues and, the darkness that comes along with mental health issues work hand in glove. And you have to address both of them either equally or until there's a good balance in there. Now, when I finally cleared this veteran, cleared his wife, cleared his home, they could feel the difference, especially the wife, because she's a Christian who really does the church and all that. And I looked at this guy and I said, listen, it doesn't matter what you believe in, but you have to find something to fill that spirituality. Okay. For me, part of my Native Americanism is understanding nature and feeling connected and attached to it. Right. To me, that is spirituality. Well, in the end, this veteran reached out and said, listen, I'm going to church now. He went and looked at some churches and picked one. It's not the same church as his wife, but he's been going to church for most of 2025, if I remember dates correctly. And he has said, well, I still have a lot of questions. Of course, in my head, I'm saying, well, who the hell doesn't? Anybody that's picked up the Bible and read page 1 has got 50 questions right off the bat, right? So in that particular case, for me, it worked perfectly because he is in mental health therapy. Okay. And I don't do those services. I either connect people or get him plugged into the VA or wherever he needs to go. The spiritual part I bring in the end to make it hand in glove. Now, if I've rambled on for like half an hour and you lost all your viewers, I apologize. But I hope that was a deep dive into your answer, or to get you your answer.
Oh, this ain't the live ones. Don't do the viewer thing. It's the podcast. Once it goes to the podcast, that's the viewers. So no worries. Don't worry about that. Now, I want to, if you don't mind, like to talk about, mysteries at the WINDHAM Inn. For those who never heard of it, for those who never heard of this story, I being one of them, what is the spiritual and historical significance of this property, and how did you first become attached to it?
So the picture on the cover is an animation or a caricature of the actual building, right? The cat is the main dark character, okay? The people, the living and those who are not living that are in this book are real, okay? I don't write fiction, right? Now, again, I take some literary license when I write, but the heart and core of what I publish is true. All right. So the story of the Wyndham Inn is a classic good versus evil, when you break it all down. But the amount of activity, the diversity that is infused into this building from both the dark side and the white light side is staggering. So how did this story come about? Well, the building is not that far from where I live, so I've seen it, the better part of my life. And I've always known there are ghosts in there, and I've bumped into enough people who have told enough stories and so on that I've always, kind of been intrigued with it, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, right? Some years ago, a fellow vet, okay, who did 20 in the Navy as a medic, he's also a medium. He started a group called Eastern Connecticut State Paranormal, and he did a couple of investigations into this book, into this property, all right? So when my book, A Date with Suicide, was getting ready to be released, he had said to me, when your book comes out, I know you're going to start doing that Mysteries of the Wyndham Inn book. Talk to me because I want to get together with you and discuss it and so on. So I said, all right. Well, at the same time, I'm having this dream about the Wyndham Inn, and in it says they're going to show you the true mysteries behind the mysteries, but be aware, 6 spirit hunters. They don't call them ghost chasers. They don't call them the other things that the TVs do. They call them spirit chasers, right? 6 spirit chasers are going to have to perish before the final truth is told about the Wyndham Inn. Now, why is that significant? Well, buckle up. Remember that guy I told you about? Navy buddy? Well, I wasn't buddies with him in the Navy, but he did 20 in the Navy and started this paranormal group. I reached out to him when the Date with Suicide was published, and he didn't hear back from him, which is odd. Usually vets return vets' calls, right? So a month goes by, 6 weeks go by, and then I see this blurb come up on one of my social media accounts that says a memorial service is going to be held for this guy. And man, my heart dropped into my stomach because I had that dream. I knew I had a sense of what was coming, but when I saw that, I was shocked. So I didn't want to believe it. So I had to reach out to some folks that mentors I've got and ask them about it. And they said, well, he had some stuff going on, but yeah, one of the dark entities inside that property had latched onto him and messed with him enough that it helped, put him in his grave. So that's kind of the backdrop to the story. And at the same time, the main character in the book, he's called Master Gary. His name is Gary Jackon, and I grew up with him. We were really tight up until we went to high school. He went to one school and I went to another. But he showed up on my property on his motorcycle. And remember, the motorcycle part is significant. So when you read the book, you're going to understand why. He showed up on my property and just started telling me about his experiences when he lived at the Wyndham Inn. And part of his story was he kept having this dream of this black cat that would attack him in his dreams. And he'd wake up and turn the lights on and search the room, and there was no cat, right? So he would just chalk it up to a bogus dream that kept reoccurring, with one exception. He had scratches, okay, on different parts of his body, and they came in 3s, all right? So I said to him, I go, you got scratches on your back. I hope you're going to be able to explain that to your girlfriend. And he kind of looked at me and goes, how did you know about that? And I said, spirits are telling me. But that's how the kind of the thing opened up. And when he was telling me the story, I knew, because I could hear the spirit world telling me, saying, that's your next book, and it needs to be a series. And I, being a smartass, I looked and I said, great. So is Hulu or Netflix going to pick it up? And the spirit world said, yes. So write the book. I'm like, oh, great. So that's kind of how it came about. And the heart of the story surrounds 280 years ago, this young woman, a teenager, was hanged not once, but twice. And the reason she was hanged was because the Salem witch trials had already run its course, and you could no longer burn people at the stake for saying they were witches. Well, they quietly said she was a witch, but they hung her for getting pregnant out of wedlock and then abandoning her child. Well, that's the legal story, if you will. Okay. The research that I've done in talking with, especially with talking with the spirits that are at the WINDHAM Inn, no, that's not the story. Okay. It's a wholly different story. And that's what I've been writing about in this book. And this is book 1, The Feral Feline. Book 2 is out here shortly. And then book 3 and 4 will be out later next year. But it's about the hanging of a woman to this day who is seen walking up and down the streets locally and peering in windows, and the countless 911 calls reporting a disheveled woman on the side of the road, and they never find her. And ironically, I was on a local radio show not too long ago when the DJ, a well-known, well-respected guy who's been in Willimantic for 50 years on WILI, 1400 WILI. In the midst of this interview, he looks at me and goes, "I got to tell you something." And I'm like, "Yeah, here we go, right?" I was with the Shaw family not too long ago, and the Shaw family is the original family of the woman that was hung, okay? And he said to me, the matriarch, Miss Shaw, was telling me a couple weeks ago that Mary was walking up High Street not far from St. Joseph's Church. And I said, wow, you know what? That makes a couple of connections, because there's an angel that calls the St. Joseph Church hers. And she's in my book because she's part of the story, the mysteries of the WINDHAM Inn. And I'll close that with this. There are mysteries inside the mysteries. That's why it's spelt this way, okay? There are mysteries in the mysteries. And so far, one person has figured out one of the clues. It's not the first one. It's actually the second or third, depending on how they figure out the first one. But there are secrets inside these books that are cryptic, and folks have to figure it out, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, the property is now, it's abandoned, but it's being, they're raising funds to convert it into a museum, and they're doing some work on the property. Well, they opened up this wall that shocked them, the folks that own it, because behind the wall was all this stuff, as if somebody literally put up the wood, put up drywall, and just pretended that they were enclosing something that nobody else would ever see again. Okay. Well, they opened up something that they're not aware of. I am. And when folks that want to really dig into the mysteries inside the mysteries, when they figure it out, they're going to have some interesting treasures to talk about.
Indeed. Indeed. And now, if you don't mind, we're going to a commercial break.
Not today.
I'm here. You can tell me anything.
I see you. We're in this together.
Breakthroughs are happening.
Treatments are evolving.
The stats can change.
Society can change.
We can all say, not today.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
If we're together, bound to be better. When we're together.
All right,
Yeah, that's a great piece. Is there any way you can send me that clip so I can post it? Man, send me that clip all by itself by email so I can I can post that thing. That's powerful. I was on Suicide Sucks podcast. She's a gal out of the UK. She's really making headroads on if you ever want to interview a great lady. Suicide Sucks. I've been on a lot of suicide themed podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But that woman in UK, she's doing a great job.
Definitely look into that. Thank you for that tip.
And again, I didn't know you were putting that out there but it sure does fit with my, book A Date with
Yeah, it's right
Suicide.
on time.
Right, but I'd
It's
love
a
to get
very
that
hard
clip so
time
I
of
can
year for a lot
put
of
it out
people.
there. Oh yes, sir. Oh yes, sir. It's funny you say that. I posted that a couple weeks ago. I reposted somebody something and said, "Listen, you're spot on because the holidays, are heightened suicide awareness, especially for veterans."
Yeah, definitely. It's now time for the rapid fire questions. This is a good time for
Uh-oh.
you?
Uh-oh. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
This is a reminder.
That it's time for rapid fire questions. All right. Favorite spiritual tool or ritual for quick cleansing?
Sage. So the four elements that we were given is sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco. But for me, I'm a big sage guy. Sage neutralizes darkness.
There you go. Biggest misconception about hauntings?
That all the spirits you see are intending to cause harm or are looking to scare people. The majority of spirits are not here to cause harm. They're either lost, confused, or they're trying to relay a message to you or trying to help you. Okay.
Right.
The majority of spirits that I bump into, are not troublemakers. Okay. And if you could see a room full of people, right? There's 100 spirits there. One or two of them are looking to, raise hell, at least in my experience.
Okay. One sign that someone's got a dark attachment.
One sign, personality change, angry, all right, does things that are out of norm, okay, out of character. Somebody that, their eating habits will change. They'll disengage from things that they really enjoyed. And again, usually in very compressed timelines because you don't like watching Ghostbusters anymore, right? Because you've watched it 1,000 times, it doesn't mean that you've got an attachment, but when you see their personalities shift, for me, it's just a matter of looking at people. I mean, I can see it as soon as I look at somebody, but the key thing is to see the person become something that they're not.
Mm-hmm. Navy experience that prepared you for spiritual battles.
What was the first part of that?
The Navy experience that prepared you for spiritual battles.
Yeah. My ride really reinforced my don't quit. Don't ever give up. Right. I was that way to begin with. I went to boot camp. I came out of boot camp in better shape than I went in. Right. Navy boot camp. Right. This wasn't difficult, but anyway, I would say resiliency, the fact that I qualified submarines in 89 days, it taught me how to navigate a lot of different things at the same time,
Right.
And again, a lot of it's not that important, making sure the sticky buns are right and all that, but it's still a responsibility. Okay. Peeling 50 pounds of potatoes while you're still doing 50,000 other things. Okay. So I would say resiliency and sheer determination was reinforced by the military that kind of honed the person that I am into a level that prepared me, for these fights that I get into, so that I won't quit, surrender, give up, touch darkness. All right. Because it's not an easy fight.
Define Heyoka in 3 words.
Anti-normal. Okay. Anti-normal. Is that 3 words or is that hyphen in there? Screw it all up.
It works for me.
Anti-normal.
Scariest entity that you've ever faced. The scariest entity you've ever faced.
You want the story or just the answer?
I go with the story.
So how we all go through these times in our life where we, blame God for everything?
Mm-hmm.
Some decades ago, I was on one of those rants. I was in the throes of, the Navy retiring me, but not taking care of me, right? And I couldn't get help for my injuries, and it was, I was trying to figure out PTSD myself before I knew PTSD, and I was at a point where the spirit world was really closing in around me, and all kinds of shit was going on, and I had enough. And I said, enough, right? Not suicide enough, just enough where it's, listen, I don't want to do this anymore. And I've got to make sure I clarify this. Great Spirit, I'm telling this story. This is not my intent. Okay. Right. So the amount of white light around me is significant. Okay. And the guides I have around me are powerful. Okay. Well, your free will is truly your free will. Okay.
Right.
If you don't want to do something, Spirit will can't make you do it. Okay. I'd had enough to the point where I blamed God and said enough. And I pushed everybody back, all my white light protection. Right.
Right.
And as I did that, I could feel their love, their happiness, their goodness drifting away with them. Okay. And in that void, as it was created, slithered this nasty serpentine thing that came through the window across the room, and it never broke eye contact with me. And I mean, this when I had the stuff back, my good stuff, and this thing came in, we're talking 5-10 seconds. We're not talking a long time. Okay. And as it came through, I knew instantaneously how bad I effed up. Okay. I felt the most wicked, raw, evil nastiness imaginable. I've never been able to come up with the words for it, but it was so revolting. It actually terrified me in a way I had never experienced before and never experienced since. Okay. This thing, while it was looking at me, was telling me mentally, I'm taking your soul, period. Okay. And nothing's going to stop this thing from getting my soul. Okay. Again, all this is playing out. The time that thing first entered, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. It was an eternity. And I mean an eternity. So if people say that purgatory isn't real, I'm telling you, I was in purgatory for the briefest of moments. And if that's what it's like to be on the dark side of things, no. But what I realized was how badly I screwed up. And from that moment forward, I took my red road, my spiritual path, as seriously as anything or anybody can. All right. That is the only time that I truly could smell, taste, sense, feel. I mean, it was like sticking to me. That I knew a million showers couldn't get it off of me. So what did I do? Right? I fell back to my faith, and I instantly dropped to my knees and said, God, please, I effed up. I rescind. I withdraw. I want everybody back. I will never do this again. And I never have. And I called on everybody from my gatekeeper, my guardian angels, to Archangel Michael. And in that moment, when my intent was truly known, because everything about spirit work is intent. Okay. What is your intent? Well, my intent had been to push back. Well, they allowed it to happen. Then my intent was to say, I learned my lesson. I learned. Please, God, come back. And I watched a spiritual battle where literally Archangel Michael had to come in. And as he did and went to war with this thing, it withdrew. It didn't get captured by the darkness. Okay, right. But they came back and put up their protection. And man, the difference of pushing protection back, feeling that darkness, and then having it return. I don't wish it upon anybody, but if you could witness and experience what I did, what I went through, the churches would be packed every day. Churches would be packed every day.
Indeed.
How'd you like that story, by the way?
Oh, I did like that story. It's very deep, and I could see Netflix or Hulu or one of those entities picking up your stories. You're very, and you being the narrator, your voice is so narration worthy. In fact, are any of your books audiobooks?
Yeah. I think two of them are, but I definitely made sure this one was on the
Okay.
audio. So yeah, I think it's $10 on Amazon for audio.
Okay.
Right?
Is it your voice?
No,
Oh, see, I
no.
think your voice is absolutely amazing. I think it should be your voice next time.
Oh, my friend, I got to tell you, that's you're not the only person telling me that, but the heart of this book is narrated by a female ghost who resides at the Wyndham Inn. Okay. So the main narrator is a woman. All right. So I had to pick a woman's voice to do the narration.
Okay.
Plus, the book is set 300 years ago, so I wanted more of an English accent in there.
Fair. Hollow bone feeling in one sentence.
One sentence. The ability to move God's light from the spirit world through me, when it's my hands or my chest, through me to where God, the spirit world, the healers need it to be. Hollow bone. The ability to move God's light.
And last one, healing burnout. Healers burnout. How to avoid it?
Balance. Right? Balance. I'm getting pretty good at foreshadowing my burnout points.
Mm-hmm.
And guys like me self-isolate, right? I love being alone. I crave quiet, right? And that to me is my recharging. Okay. But to avoid burnout, stay balanced and listen to your inner voice. It is constantly ahead of us, preparing us. And when we don't listen to our inner self, that's when we go down the burnout path.
Right. All right. Well, that concludes this episode of the Morning Therapy. Would you like to leave the audience with any last words?
I want to do this again. This is too much fun, man. Come on, a couple of sub-vets bouncing around the spirit world. How much fun is this? Listen, if you want to
sound like a good animation movie,
right? You want to learn to have faith. Go lock yourself in a submarine and let it do a few warp speeds around the world with some angles and dangles. And then hold your breath and be quiet and live on peanut butter sandwiches for a few weeks, right?
Indeed. All right. Well, that concludes this episode. D. Paul has illuminated the shadowy intersections of spirituality, hauntings, and healing on today's episode of Morning Therapy. His stories from the Wyndham Inn and beyond remind us that unresolved trauma and spiritual unrest demand courage, wisdom, and light to confront. Some key takeaways is true healing bridges the physical, emotional, and spiritual realms, often requiring us to face darkness head on. As a hollow bone vessel, D. Paul channels ancestral and divine guidance to battle malevolent forces. English is my second language. Elizabeth's legacy underscores timeless themes of justice, karma, and the eternal good versus evil struggle. I want y'all to connect with D. Paul at dpaul@blackhawkbooks.com on Facebook or X at dpaulfleming442 and grab Mysteries at the Wyndham Inn on Amazon. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe, rate, and share Morning Therapy wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, stay grounded in the light. And believe me, all this information will be in the show notes. So stay tuned for the next episode of Morning Therapy. Thank you, Mr. D. Paul, for your service and for appearing on today's episode of Morning Therapy. And to everyone else, be well,
keep moving forward,
and continue to be great, everybody.